Hey everyone, Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and today I am reviewing a fantasy book that I just recently read. This is a middle grade fantasy novel, and I've been looking for some new fantasy authors that I've been wanting to read, and there was this author who put out their debut book. I was actually kind of interested in it because it looked pretty good from what I was seeing online, so I thought, well, why don't I go try and find that book? So I found a copy at a library and I picked it up, and it is Georgie and the Scribes of Scatterplot by Isaac Rudansky. Now, Isaac Rudansky, this is his first book that he's written that's a middle grade fantasy fiction novel. I think he's written some nonfiction stuff, but this is his first fantasy or fictional title that he's got. And so this one I thought looked pretty interesting. The basic premise is there's this kid named Georgie who his dad is very sick, and then he has this good friend Roscoe who lives across the street from him. His friend Roscoe is a YouTuber who loves to put out YouTube videos of all kinds, and then he also has this girl that is becoming his friend named Apurva who also lives nearby. And Georgie soon discovers that not is all as it seems, because suddenly there is a rip in the time-space continuum, and an evil figure comes through that rip and tries to steal something from Georgie, but instead steals his dad. And now it is up to Georgie and his friends to follow this evil person through this rip in the time-space continuum to get his dad back. And there's a lot of fun to be had here. So I really pretty much enjoyed this book. I will say from the beginning, I think this book does suffer a little bit from being a debut novel. I think there are some choices that Isaac Rudansky makes that don't quite work. This is also a very long book. It's almost 400 pages, and there is a lot happening, but at the same time, it didn't feel like a lot happened. But it never felt boring, and it never felt like it dragged out. I feel like the storyline keeps you moving, and there's enough mystery and intrigue and things happening that will keep you going for sure. There's also quite a bit of fun fantasy stuff that takes place in this book that I was just loving. I thought the whole, the rip to different universes was super fun. I think that, it's not something that's groundbreaking. We've definitely seen this before, but this book was a ton of fun. Now, this book reminded me a lot of another book series called The Seams. And in The Seams, you have this story about this kid who is kind of like working behind what's going on in our world by there's the train of thought, and there's all these different plays on words that are happening where the characters are kind of controlling and doing the things that people are doing in real life, if that makes any sense. Well, let me explain. So kind of in that book, The Seams, you have the train of thought. And so whenever someone is saying oh, I had a train of thought or I lost it, in that world of The Seams, there's actually an actual train that's full of the thoughts of that person that is lost on the tracks, and they have to find it again. So it's kind of like that, where in this book, you have what's going on behind the scenes of everyone's memories. And I'm not going to say much more about that because I don't want to do any spoilers in this book, but you do have a situation where there are all these memories that are behind the scenes of the people on Earth. You also have a very interesting apocalyptic kind of stakes that was super fun. And I really, really liked that. I thought, oh, that is a great idea. I feel like this book is full of a bunch of great ideas that are pretty well held together, but just a little bit falling apart here and there. For instance, there is a plot line that is kind of dropped near the end of the book. And I remember thinking, wait, what about that? What happened with that? And then it never was addressed. And I thought, oh, that's unfortunate. I wish that we had at least gotten some kind of a tease that there was something going on there, because that would have been interesting. You do get at the very, very, very end of the book an epilogue that does promise more from this world. And I would definitely read a sequel to this book. I do hope we get a sequel. This book came out in February of 2025. And so obviously a sequel probably wouldn't be out for quite a while, but still, I would read a second book in this series because I am that intrigued by some of the things that Isaac Rudansky sets up here, because he does set up some interesting things that we never get to, but are promised. And even though there are those things we don't get to yet in this book, there's still a ton of fun in this book as well. You do find out some major questions to mysteries that are set up right at the beginning, and I liked that. But one of those answers to one of those questions was extremely serious. And it kind of had me pause a second and really think about the audience for this book. And I was thinking, ooh, that is pretty intense for a middle grade book. And so I would almost say this is better for older middle grade, like that 8th grade, 7th grade kind of range. Not as much for that younger 5th, 6th grade range, because there is one topic in here that is discussed that's pretty intense and pretty weighty. And I think a lot of kids might have a little trouble kind of processing it because it doesn't really get processed in the storyline. So I kind of felt like that was a little difficult if you were a younger reader. If you're an adult or an older reader, I think it's doable because you've probably been through more things in life and able to say, okay, I understand what the author is doing here. This is pretty intense, but I can see what they're up to with this storyline. So I did feel like that was kind of intense. I do also think, though, you have a great villain in this book and a super intriguing exploration of that villain. It is not a super cookie cutter villain. You have definitely some nuance and some things that are going on there, and I thought it was a really fun exploration. You also have a little bit of a MacGuffin situation where the characters are trying to find this one thing and figure out what to do with it. And I thought that was a ton of fun. So if you like MacGuffins, you like a lot of mystery and intrigue to your fantasy book, this one is going to be right up that alley. I will say too, though, like I said, there's some parts that do seem to drag a tiny bit. Like there's not a lot that happens in this book, but then there's a lot of pages in the book. There is one extended battle sequence, though, about maybe like 2/3 of the way in, that was so fun, and so much happens, and there are stakes, and I kept thinking, oh my goodness, you're going there. And it was good. I really, really liked that part of it. So overall, I enjoyed this book quite a bit. I think you get some fun fantasy things. You have a great system of like world building going on here. You've got a great villain. You've got a great mystery to kick off the storyline with the father going missing and you really don't know what's going on yet. And it's just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And like I said too, there's that apocalyptic piece that was really fun and I really enjoyed it. So overall, I would give Georgie Summers and the Scribes of Scatterplot a solid 4 out of 5 stars. I think there was enough there that it doesn't quite make it to 5 stars for me, but definitely in the 4-star range. I think that you have some good characters, you've got a lot of fun things that are happening, you've got a lot of good humor, you have some good fantasy elements, but there's a few threads that are left hanging that aren't really, they're not like saved for a later book, it's more just dropped. And you also have just a little bit of drag out here and there and a few things that don't quite connect. But otherwise, this is a pretty fun fantasy book. I think if you have read The Seams, that series, you would really like this book. I think you might also like this if you like Fablehaven. You might think this is interesting, especially if you're a fan of the MacGuffin parts of Fablehaven, where they have to go find magical items. That is kind of this piece here. Or if you like a good Robin Hood fantasy story, there's a little bit of that here too. So definitely check this one out. I think this is a pretty good one if you're into middle grade fantasy books that are pretty long. I think you'll enjoy this one. I don't know if you would need to necessarily go pick it up right away, but I would definitely put it on like a summer reading list for when you're, kind of bored and you're thinking, oh, I want another book to read. Oh, there's that one, Georgie Summers and the Scribes of Scatterplot. That might not be a bad one to check out. Definitely check that out then. So until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye.